Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast, episode number 78. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by Iowa Cubs and occasional Chicago Cubs broadcaster Alex Cohen. Alex, how are we doing, man?
You're doing great. 78 episodes. That's a lot, Greg. Nice work.
78 episodes. This is I was actually just doing the math right before we hopped on. This is episode number 198 of episodes that I've hosted between this and the previous Growing Cubs show. So
Haven't even gotten to 200 yet. Come on now.
haven't even gotten to 200. We got our big our episode next week is our big award show episode, which I was hoping that'd be number 200. It'll be number 199. So number 200 will be the first of like the actual off season, which is fine.
Got it.
That works. That's all good.
Very nice.
So I've got it right off the top. Right off the top, I've got to ask you about the thing going viral on Cubs Twitter. I didn't warn you about this. Cool Ranch, nacho cheese, spicy chili, spicy nacho. What's the favorite? What's the best Doritos flavor?
It's Cool Ranch. Not even a question. No hesitation. I saw Avi Shirts was tweeting about it yesterday, and Kerry Wood went Cool Ranch, and I can't go wrong with Kid K. So I'm Cool Ranch all the way. I like nacho cheese. Like I don't discriminate with my Doritos, but Cool Ranch gun in my head for sure.
You and Kid K, are there more ways in which you guys are similar? Or is it just the Doritos flavor?
You know what? I'll have to ask him. So.
I love it, man. All right, well, we got a good episode lined up today. We're recording this, just so you guys are aware, we're recording this on Saturday morning. So there's still a couple games left of the Tennessee and Iowa series. Iowa still has one more series left this year. The Tennessee Smokies are wrapping up their regular season on Sunday, and they'll go straight from a series with Birmingham into a playoff series with Birmingham to start off the this week. And then hopefully they get through that division series and go on to continue on with the playoffs. But recording this on Saturday morning, we've got lots to talk about in terms of players, because in Iowa, there are so many players to talk about, so many good prospects, so many top prospects there. And we'll get into that plenty. But I do want to start off the show by talking about, I kind of hinted at it, you've been calling some Chicago Cubs games in Wrigley. Last weekend, you called a couple games, including one game, which was a no-hitter, a combined no-no. Yeah. How's that whole experience been in Chicago calling games for the Cubs?
I mean, no-hitter withstanding. I mean, no-hitter, not no-hitter, win-loss. I mean, calling a game at Wrigley Field it's so special. And I know that sounds cliche and not candid, but I mean, you go up there, you sit in the press box, and you have 42,000 fans, all standing up, singing "Go Cubs Go," or singing the seventh inning stretch. It's exactly what baseball should be like. And it really is. I mean, it is one of one. So being able just to call a game there, I mean, it's a career bucket list item, and being able to achieve that. And then obviously calling the no-hitter last Wednesday night. Not what I was expecting. And it was a really neat experience.
Had you called a no-no in the minors?
Yeah. So the first no-no I called in the minors was 2012. I was with the Huntsville Stars, and they lost 2-1. They walked 11, had 3 errors, 2 sack flies, no hits, but lost 2-1. So that was like my first no-hitter for a team that lost. And then in 2021 for the Iowa Cubs, it was like the year of the no-hitters. So we had a couple combined no-hitters, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the year. I think there were a few others throughout the system too that year.
Oh yeah.
I think there was one week where I think you guys had one in Iowa, and then another affiliate had one.
Myrtle had one. Yeah. So I think Myrtle had 2 no-hitters. We did. We had like our third home game against the Indy Indians. 3 pitchers combined. Justin Steele part of it. So I mean, it was a fun reintroduction back to baseball after losing COVID, or the season due to COVID. So it was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. All right, man. You want to start digging into players right away here, because we got plenty to talk about.
Let's do it.
All right, man. Let's. I think we should probably lead off with this group of hitters, because I mean we've talked about them plenty on the show. We've talked about them quite a bit since they were all called up together. But let's talk about the guy that has spent his entire year in Iowa up to this point, and that's Owen Caissie. Sure. Because Owen Caissie over the past couple of weeks has really started to turn it on. I'd been calling for him on this show to really start to put everything together, right? Like we'd seen all of the individual parts be really, really good over the course of the year. But these past few weeks or so, like he really has started to put it all together.
Yeah, it's the power surge for Owen. And I remember at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of singles, a lot of doubles, a lot of Ks, and not that many home runs. And around Memorial Day, he had 2 homers, and you're thinking, when is the power finally going to materialize? Well, he's got 18 home runs. Hopefully he gets 20. He's got around 30 doubles, leads the team in runs batted, and leads the team in runs scored, leads the team in hits. He's got an 850 OPS. So for a 22-year-old, first year in AAA, being 4 years younger than the average AAA player, when you have a guy who was expected to struggle a little bit just because of a lot of Ks and experience pitching, he's been nothing but impressive. And I know some people are calling for Owen to go up to the big leagues and possibly get a couple at bats before the end of the year. He's got to get put on the 40-man come the offseason. I get both sides. For people who think that he needs to go up to the big leagues and play, the guy has over 500 at bats. Doesn't really need that. So if you can go up there, get a nice little taste at the end of the season, 20, 25 ABs to bring you into spring training and say, hey, I made it to the big leagues. This is what I did well. This is what I need to work on. Kind of makes sense to me. But also he's just been really impressive, not only offensively, defensively as well. He can play left, he can play right. He leads the team in outfield assists. It's a really underrated part of his game. He can field, he can throw. The 5 tools are there for Owen Caissie.
I know that Brian, specifically Brian and I had been talking about Owen being called up for this, as we're talking now, this Colorado series. Thought that it would be kind of a good landing spot going out to Colorado to start off his major league career. And I think that the reason why we kind of kept mentioning that was because at that point, there's essentially just a week left of AAA games left. So he's
Yeah.
not, and like you said, he's already over 500 plate appearances this year. So you're not looking at a situation where like he loses out on development during his time in
No.
Iowa if he's to call up now. I think that some people confuse that with like, all right, the Cubs need to win. Let's call up Owen Caissie. I made the joke. I posted a joke on Twitter last night where it's like, oh, the Cubs might have won this game had Owen Caissie not been down in AAA. It's like it's a joke. Like
I think I saw that. It was funny.
they're not like it's not legit, right? Like I don't think Owen Caissie can come up and make the Cubs go 13-0, 14-0, 15-0, whatever it is in their last games of the season, right? Like it's not about that. It's about at this point, he's not losing out on development in AAA. What he
No.
does gain is like what it's like in a big league clubhouse, and like that's what I'm excited to see. I'm hoping we see that.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I don't think it's the end of the world. But like that's the view I have of it, not necessarily like help the Chicago Cubs right now.
Yeah, you don't have to go up and go 10 for 20 over an 8-game stretch and
Yeah.
help the Cubs go 11-5 in their last 16 games to miss out by the playoffs by 2 games or make the playoffs by 2 games. You're not calling him up for that. Like if you ask Pete Crow Armstrong, he'll say that going up to the big leagues last year and getting his sub 100 at bats was so important to his development because you go into the offseason, you recognize like, man, like I thought I did things really well. Here's what guys do up in the big leagues. These are how they prepare. This is what they do pregame. This is what they do postgame. This is how they take care of their bodies. So I don't really care if Caissie goes up there and doesn't play at all, or maybe gets 20
exactly.
at bats, 10 at bats. You go up there and just experience it. Say that, hey, we believe in you. You had a hell of a year in AAA. We want to see what you can do. Small sample size up in the big league so you can go into spring training, big league camp, and see what you can do.
What do you think the likelihood of him breaking camp with Chicago next year is?
I mean, it just depends on their outfield situation. It's not based on him. It'll be really tough if you still have. You're going to have Pete Crow Armstrong in center, hopefully. You're going to have Seiya Suzuki in right, probably. You're going to have Ian Happ in left, most likely. What Cody Bellinger is going to do if he's going to opt in, because if you do, you have 4 guys right there. So you're probably not going to get a lot of time in the outfield. And then you have Alexander Canario. You probably have a minor league free agent that you're going to bring into camp to be a 4th, 5th outfielder. So you still have Mike Talkman to figure out, a guy who's been so integral to the team's clubhouse over the last 2 years. They will have to make some roster moves and deals in order for guys like Owen Caissie and Kevin Alcantara to break camp with the team and be part of the 2025 Cubs starting picture in the outfield.
The bright side is you can do a whole lot worse than having the first year, your first option year, the first year on the 40-man roster, be at age 22. He's going to start off next year at age 22 in Iowa, in AAA. Like, you can do a whole lot worse than that. That's fine. Like, I obviously want to see him come up in Chicago and kill it, but, like, I think it's fine. I think it's fine that he can be that first guy up, even if Cody Bellinger opts out, right? Say he opts out and there's just like those 3 guys in the outfield. Well, you can still get away with, like, if you want him to continue to mash down in AAA and then, like, the first injury that happens, let him continue mashing in Chicago. I don't know.
Yeah,
There's a lot of different variables that are in
there is.
play in order to make that work.
You could DH Seiya for a given period of time and put somebody else in the outfield, give him more games. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Pete Crow Armstrong's going to play center field pretty much every game, and as long as Ian Happ doesn't get traded, he's going to play left field pretty much every game.
Yep.
Seiya Suzuki will be in the lineup pretty much every game, although you can DH him and play right. And if Cody doesn't opt in, it does add a couple of spots. That being said, you have Alexander Canario, who you do want to give a chance. You have Kevin Alcantara, who's on the 40-man roster. You have Owen Caissie. So you have those internal options that it's not just one, it's three of them that you have to make significant big league plate appearances for to give a chance.
Yeah, let's talk about Kevin Alcantara then. I think that's a good transition because I think we've been talking about Owen Caissie and Kevin Alcantara in the same breath for the past few years, right? They've kind of gone hand in hand with each other, just based on like their super raw skills that have continued to develop. And now you got Kevin Alcantara in AAA, and he's looking pretty good over the course of the season, right? He's not Owen. I think Owen Caissie started to separate himself a little bit in terms of like where we rank him and where we view him in terms of the major league roster and things like that. But Kevin Alcantara is just still kind of just hanging around there.
He's still so raw. I mean, you look at 6'6", 190, the raw ability he can run. He can really play the outfield. Like his first step in the outfield is elite at all three positions. So that's a really nice luxury to have. He can play right. He's got the arm. He can obviously play left and center because of the speed. I think hitting-wise, he has some of the best exit velos that I've seen all season over the last week. Not credited for hits. I mean, Friday night at Principal Park, he had a ball 112 right at the shortstop. He had a ball 106 for a lineout. So they don't show up as hit on the scorebook. But if you look at Baseball Savant, the hard contact is there. The strikeouts are low. His raw ability might be the best of any Cubs prospect I've seen since Pete Crow Armstrong. I mean, it's one of the top three that since I've been with the iCubs. So, Caissie and Alcantara are completely different. Alcantara, long, lean, right-handed hitter, lots of power from the right side of it. You watch him take BP. It's one of the most impressive things you see. Owen Caissie is a different type of power hitter. He's more of game power. His batting practice is much more meticulous, spray chart, line to line, doubles. But, and then Owen goes down, gets a cutter earlier this series, and it's at 414 to dead center field. So, they both have a lot of power. It's different power, but they're both really talented.
Have I told you about the Kevin Alcantara batting practice story that when I saw him taking BP?
You have not. No.
Well, I told it on the show, and it's worth mentioning again because it's unbelievable. It cracks me up. I was in Peoria when he was hurt last year. He had like a leg injury last year, but he was still with South Bend at the time. So he decided to hop in the cage and take some BP, but just like top half hacks, right? Because he had a leg injury, so he wasn't like actually swinging. He was just using his arms, only his arms, and he was taking balls over the berm in left field, like to the fence that blocks off the ballpark from the road in Peoria. He was hitting it over that grassy area, and it's like the dude's raw power is absolutely
it's
insane.
It's insane. I mean, his talent is off the charts. I mean, I was talking with manager Marty Peavy about this. He said there will never be a field that Kevin walks onto that he won't be one of the most talented players, like big leagues, minor leagues, Olympics, World Baseball Classics, anything. He will always be one of the most talented players on the field.
And it's not like he's that power. I mean, he's batting 273 this year over the course of the year. The strikeout and walk rates are hovering right around league average between AA and AAA, right around league average. It's like, okay, if you can have those walk rates and strikeout rates right around league average, if you can bat 273, that's a pretty valuable player given the other things he does, right? Given the fact that he can get into one and go yard at any time, given the fact that he's fast and he can go first to third on the base paths whenever he wants to, or go first to home on a double, given the fact that he plays great center field defense, like you mentioned. I mean, I think that it's been said before, if Pete Crow Armstrong hadn't been coming up through the system right around the same time as Kevin Alcantara, we would be talking about how good Kevin Alcantara is on defense in the center field. We have been, but Pete's been there, right? Like it's Pete's world. We're living in it in terms of his defense. But like Kevin Alcantara is so good out there in center field.
If Pete Crow Armstrong were in this organization, Kevin Alcantara would probably be in the big leagues.
Yeah.
Way that is. Yeah.
Matt Shaw. Let's talk Matt Shaw because Matt Shaw is fun, dude. So Kevin Alcantara is fun in his own way, right? He's fun in his own way. Matt Shaw
You're getting
is fun
excited,
in
Greg. I almost knocked over the camera
I
there.
almost knocked over the camera. I'm going crazy about Matt Shaw over here. We're all
Yeah.
good. Matt Shaw is fun, dude. What have you liked what you've seen from Matt Shaw so far?
I like the athleticism. He can
Yeah.
run. Yeah, people talk about, well, he's a shortstop in college. What's he going to play defensively up in the big leagues? I really like his left side of the infield instincts. He's played third the last 5-6 games with the I-Cup since he came back from the lower body injury. He looks really good over there, really comfortable. Made a really nice play at second last week on the first day that he came back for a double play. And he's got a type of swing that you look at that you're like, this shouldn't work. With the high leg kick, all I just need to be is a right-handed pitcher, throw hard, throw him inside. And he makes it work. The opposite field power is legit. He went dead center the other night, 416 feet on a ball that looked like a line drive. And it just kept on going and going and going. And, you talk about Matt Shaw's season, 19 combined home runs, 28 combined doubles, 28 combined stolen bases. That's a really big year for a 22-year-old in your first full pro season. He was drafted last year. And to have your first pro season when you're, again, 4 years below league average, when it comes to age, and you're about to hit 20 home runs, and you're about to steal 30 bags, and you're hitting 275, and your OPS is around 850, that's really good.
Yeah, the home run to center field was what got me. I watched that. I
Yeah.
saw that happen, and off the bat, it legit looked like a line drive that was going to drop in front of the center fielder. If he was playing
Yep.
back a little bit, it looked like that off the bat, and it kept carrying and carrying and carrying over that center field wall. I think it was 107 off the bat. I think is what it
Yep.
was, and
Yep.
it was a line drive shot to center field. The pop is clearly there. His you're right about the leg kick. It's interesting because there's definitely two different leg kicks, right? The normal big crazy bring his knee up to his chest leg kick, and then
Yeah.
the let me cut it down with
Subtle.
he cuts it down with 2 strikes, right? But he also
does.
kind of cuts it down from time to time outside of 2 strikes if he feels like he needs to. And that that wherewithal to understand I need to cut it down here even outside of 2 strikes is awesome. I've got the system stats pulled up in front of me right now on my spreadsheet that I keep. And I'm looking at Matt Shaw, and it's just I have everything color coded based on how good you are in the organization, green to red, all that good
Yeah.
stuff, just green across the board with Matt Shaw because he does everything well, right? I'm looking at his OPS plus, his K percentage plus, and walk percentage plus numbers, which are 100 league average. Anything over 100 is better than league average. 122 OPS plus, 122 K percentage plus, 119 walk percentage plus. It is
pretty consistent.
he's just
Yeah.
good across the board, dude. Everything he does. How have you liked what you've seen from him defensively at third base specifically?
I really like it. As I said, his left side of the infield defensive instincts looks like he can play in the big leagues right now. I don't think he's a big league shortstop. Obviously, when you have Dansby Swanson for a long period of time, you don't have to worry about that. But I think he can go and play third base right now and be completely fine. Everyone's like, well, the arm's fine. He's not going to be a plus defender at third, but he's got good hands, enough of a range. And the arm's fine at third. I think he's working on it in second because he's never played the right side of the infield. He's gotten a lot better at second base in the time that he's spent here. But I think right now he could start at third base up in the big leagues and you would not have any issues.
Well, here's my take on Matt Shaw. I think that we can talk about a player being a utility defense player without bringing up Ben Zobrist. I know that I feel like the Chicago Cubs we always talk about utility guy like Ben Zobrist. It's I get
That's not like the standard that's
exactly.
that's really high. You want somebody who's right here, yeah.
Yes, and it's I think that I get why, because he was that guy. He was the great example that we used during the peak Chicago Cubs time when they won the World Series. He was a utility guy. I get why the conversation happens. However, we can have a conversation about Matt Shaw potentially being a utility guy, given his uncertainty or whatever about what position is best.
Yeah.
And given the fact that the roster looks like the way it does in Chicago right now, I think he might be a good candidate to be a utility guy in Chicago. Play some third, play some second, maybe play some corner outfield, get some DH spots, things like that.
Yeah.
That's the way that I think that Matt Shaw logs a decent amount of at-bats in Chicago next year. It's more about getting him the at-bats and less about him being good defensively at multiple positions. You know what I mean? Like, I
I
want him
think
at bat to get at bats.
yeah, I think you want him to be comfortable defensively because, I mean, it's a
Yes.
lonely place playing the hot corner at Wrigley Field if things aren't going well. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, you don't have to be Ben Zobrist. You could be Isaiah Kiner Falefa and still have a productive 23-year-old year,
Yeah.
at the big league level. But I will say, just offensively, what he's able to bring to the table, hitting to all fields. And people are like, oh, well, he only hits the ball opposite field. He doesn't pull the ball. His last 2 home runs for the I-Cubs, one over the left field wall in St. Paul, hit it well over 400 feet. One to dead center at Principal Park. So, yeah, he can pull the ball. He can hit it to center. And guess what? He's got 3 extra base hits or 3 doubles in the last 4 games, and they've all been to left, center, and right respectively. So he can hit the all fields.
One last thing on Matt Shaw. His stance. We talked about his leg kick, right? But the stance is just so interesting to me. I don't. I need to go back and look at video now compared to video at the beginning of the year. But friend
Yeah.
of the show, RM Layton, pointed out. He goes, every time I see video of Matt Shaw, I think he closes off his stance more. It's like
Yeah.
basically he's back. Like the numbers on his back are facing the pitcher. I don't know that it actually has closed off over the course of the year. I don't know that. But I think it's more the fact that it's so jarring that it's such a closed
Yeah.
off stance that like it just catches our eye every single time. I haven't really seen a hitter that closed off, and it's not only like the feet, right? The feet are closed off for sure, but it's more he tucks his shoulder in so that those numbers do face the pitcher. It's a jarring
Yeah.
stance. It's crazy to me.
There's a big manipulation of that front shoulder for sure. But everyone talks about stance and like, oh, it's so not traditional. Can you have success? We're talking about a sport where Jeff Bagwell was in a catcher's crouch and became a Hall of Famer. Like Julio
Yeah.
Franco would coil the bat above his head. Gary Sheffield would wiggle his bat back and forth like my dog wiggles his tail, and he should be a no hitter. So it's different, but it's not. Like weird stances, like work for some people. They work for Gary Sheffield. They work for Jeff Bagwell. They work for Julio Franco. And you know what? If they work for Matt Shaw, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
It's all about the cues, right? Like if his
Yeah.
cue is that he needs to keep his front shoulder in, then standing that way helps, right? Like Anthony Rizzo, back when he was coming up through the minors and into the major leagues, like he made the decision to pull his hands down because that was a cue for him to start with his hands down there, and eventually they came up to the same spot. But it's just it's a cue for Matt Shaw to keep his front shoulder closed. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll see what happens when he goes up to the big leagues. Like, yeah, the leg kick and the front shoulder tuck will be tough when you're Jared Jones and throwing 101 at the hands. But if he has success, great. If he doesn't, he'll make adjustments, clearly.
All right, we talked about the connections between Owen Caissie and Kevin Alcantara. Let's talk about the connections between Matt Shaw and James Triantos. Triantos, again, he comes up. I think that my big thing with James Triantos is his time in Iowa. He hasn't at all looked overmatched. And I think that's the thing. Like, he's never looked overmatched at any level that he's played at, whether it was being young for his assignment at Myrtle Beach, or him coming back from injury and playing in South Bend, or him starting off the year and being super young in Double A Tennessee this year. Him getting a promotion at 20, is he still 21 years old? 21, 22 years old in Iowa. Like, he's never looked overmatched. I think that'll be the case once he makes the major leagues as well. Like, I think he won't look overmatched no matter what he does. What's your big takeaways on James Triantos so far in your view of him?
He's big league ready right now. I mean, you talk to a scout and they say that he is the safest Cubs prospect out of this crew. Like, you can bring him up to the big leagues right now. He might not hit 300, but he'll hit 265. He'll steal some bags. He'll get on base at a 320 clip. Like, if you trade Nico Horner for some instance and you need somebody to go up there, give you quality big league appearances, you don't have to look far. He has, I won't say a low ceiling, but obviously like the power hasn't quite projected at the minor league level yet. But you have a guy who hits 300 at the minor league level, can steal 50 bags, can hit 30 doubles. Like, that's just fine. Yeah, if you're looking for a pro comp for him, he gives me some Michael Young hitterish tendencies, like different body frames, but just with the way that they approach hitting, two-strike approach, going the opposite way, never looking overmatched, always a competitive AB. Reminds me of Michael Young, and that's a pretty good comparison to have. So I really like James. He runs a lot better than I thought he did. Like, the speed, like obviously it's not Pete Crow Armstrong, but it's pretty elite. If Pete's an 80, then James is 70 or 65. It's pretty good.
Yeah, we had a segment a couple episodes back, me and Brian, specifically on James Triantos' speed and comparing him to past Cubs prospects. But Yeah, the Triantos, because I have people commenting every day to me like, why is James Triantos? I think he's like a 45 on Fangraphs and MLB Pipeline
Yeah,
in terms of his speed, and people are like, why is he 45 if he's stolen more bases. He has 47 steals and he's a 45
yeah,
rating
it's
scouts
crazy.
rating tool. It's that's an old rating. I think that like he went down with a knee injury prior to the 2023 season, right? Prior to
Yeah,
2023 season when he was assigned to South Bend, and so that's why he got a late start there. And he obviously wasn't stealing a ton of bases last year. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean he's not a 45 scouts rating tool.
he can fly.
Speed. Yeah, he can. He's a
He,
fast dude.
he can fly. He's good player. Obviously, you want to see what he can do defensively. The Cubs have done some things, putting him in center, putting him in second. But if you bring him up to the big leagues, you're going to get a competitive AB. You might get a little bit of power, but he'll definitely be able to run. So again, like he is the safest of the Cubs prospects. You know that if you call him up, you will not have an issue. You play for the Chicago Cubs, you play second base, you hit eighth, and it'll be just fine.
And I know that there's a lot of teams out there that would also value what he does. And we talked about like I think James Triantos could be for another team starting at second base earlier this year at the major league level, just given
Without a
his
doubt.
profile, and he's a guy where like maybe you call him up, maybe he gets traded, maybe he stays with the Cubs, whatever it is, and he goes through some development doesn't stop once you reach the majors, obviously, but I think like he could be a really, really good example of that where like at age 28, he starts bopping some home runs. You know what I mean? Like where he comes into his power later in his career, all while age 22 through 27, he's still hitting 280 or whatever it is in the majors.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it's
Like,
like some Whit Merrifield stuff there. So
yeah, exactly. Last hitter to talk about is one of the more fun guys. I mean, I saved the of the big bunch, maybe the most exciting for last. Moises
pun
Ballesteros.
intended. Pun intended. Big boy.
He's a big boy. Moises Ballesteros he's been the story of the system this year, I think. He's been the guy that we've loved talking about the most on the show. He has made his way as a 20-year-old up to Iowa. What's your take on Moises Ballesteros and how fun he is to watch?
Yeah, I don't like Moises Ballesteros. I love Moises Ballesteros. I love Mo Baller, man. He can flat out hit. Even without like the getting better, working hard, trying to be a viable catching option for the Cubs. That bat's going to play in the big leagues, and it could have played yesterday. They talk about the comparison, body wise, skill wise, to Alejandro Kirk. Tell you what, Alejandro Kirk wasn't doing this at 20. At the AAA level, on pace for 20 minor league home runs, hitting to all fields, not striking out a lot. He is Alejandro Kirk, but better because he's got more power. He's got better hands. He can actually run a little bit. I know Moises has lost a little weight during the offseason, so he looks a little bit more nimble and can withstand an entire season. I think Moises Ballesteros can go up to the big leagues right now and bring a jolt into that Cubs lineup. You're not hitting him fourth, but you're hitting him eighth. And I think it's a catching situation that, in my opinion, Miguel Amaya proved that he gets the opportunity to be the number one Cubs catcher going out of spring training next year, 2025, catch 100 games. Moises Ballesteros, in my opinion, with the way that he's worked with Iowa, could catch the other 62 and then DH another 20 games. So you give him 82 games up at the big league level, you're going to get, as a 21-year-old catcher, 255 with 12 homers as a platoon catcher. He's, in terms of like who's going to be an all-star, like who would I bet on the 2024 Iowa Cubs right now? Who would I go to the casino, go to DraftKings, say who's going to be an all-star on this team? It's Moises.
I think that as I've watched like his progression this year, there's been a lot of things that I was hopeful for that have come to fruition, right? Like I think that like I was really hopeful that he would continue to climb the ladder. I did not expect him to be in Iowa, obviously, by the end of this year. I did not expect him to be banging down the door for Chicago by the end of this year. But I did expect to see that like really good hit tool, his crazy ability to go down the left center to the left center gap. I expect that to continue to develop while continue to developing more power, more home run power, which we've seen, right? He, like you said, he's got 19 home runs this year.
19.
19
Yeah,
home
he's got
runs,
10
23
at the AAA
doubles.
level. Yep.
It's crazy. Like we've seen everything continue to develop. The strikeout rate is staying below 20%. He's looked good across the board. The defense has continued to develop more and more this year. So across the board, everything we've seen is what I'd hoped to see entering this year. The one thing I did not even think about, and what I've loved seeing, is the fact that he is now pushing 500 plate appearances this year. He's played a full
Mhm.
season. He's been in AA. He's been in AAA. He's caught a lot of those games, and he's
Body
still
not breaking.
performing really, really well right now, right? Like, so it's not
That's a
like
big
he's
one.
limping to the finish, right? Like, it's not like he's like, oh, I'm exhausted. I've been catching this whole time. I'm 20 years old. I'm not used to this. Let me just get to this finish line. It's a thing where like he is now like he's still hitting the ball really hard. The other night he had
Mhm.
last night on Friday night he had a ball off the right field wall where like he stung a fastball. He stung a
Yep.
fastball, and that's good to see. It's like that I was not expecting. I was not expecting him to hold up in that way over the course of this long season.
Yeah, I mean, he pulled a fastball 95 from Chase Petty, who's like one of the top pitching prospects in the Reds organization. So, no, I think he's made a deliberate effort to have his body mature, and he's 20 years old, trying to get bigger, trying to get stronger, trying to keep his weight in check, and also like a deliberate effort to get better behind the plate and working with manager Marty Peavy and working with the Cubs staff and working with the experienced pitchers. As I said, like if I'm putting money on this crew of players, who's going to be a Major League Baseball all-star, it's without a doubt Moises. He's special. Like the hitting tool is special. The motor and just the raw ability is special. Like I love him. Like in terms of a prospect, in terms of a player, in terms of a person, like he's a stud.
I a little fun with some stats here. The last two guys we talked about, James Triantos and Moises Ballesteros. I'm looking at the like three true outcome percentage
Yeah.
leaderboard in the system, like the guys who have the lowest percentage of strikeouts, walks, and home runs, right? Like that
Yeah.
three true outcome. Two of there's a lot of dudes that are not exactly top prospects in this organization. Like
Yeah.
a guy like Rayvaj Garcia, which Rayvaj hitting a home run the other night was awesome in Iowa. I tweeted out that
Electric.
Rayvaj hit a home run. He had not yet homered yet this year. Over the
Yeah.
course of the season, he had the lowest ISO in the entire organization, and he goes yard in AAA, which was like the coolest. I thought that was
It was
awesome.
electric. It was
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
but there's a lot of guys that like are known for just like putting bat on ball, right? Like Darius Hill is on that list, who's in Iowa. Ezekiel Pagan
Always
is
will
another
be.
guy. Like there's
Yeah.
those guys that are like bats a ball type dudes, not exactly producing a lot of power. Then you got James Triantos, who has a three true outcome percentage of 18%, which is like unbelievably low. Like
That's
that's crazy
exorbitantly
low.
high. Yeah.
And then Moises Ballesteros, who is down on that list, where really most of that percentage comes from the fact that he's hitting a lot of homers. You know, like
Yeah.
he's not striking out a whole lot. He's actually walking less than he typically does. But it's worth pointing out that like those two guys are really good at like that's a fun brand of baseball.
It
Outside of
is.
like the three true outcomes, like watching these guys play is fun. In addition to like anything like prospect related, prospect coverage, prospect rankings, they're fun to watch play baseball, and like that's why I've enjoyed them in AAA this year.
It's been a lot of fun, and I think when you look at the Chicago Cubs roster, and they strike out a fair amount right now. Like Ian Happ's had a wonderful year. He's still going to strike out a fair amount. If you look at Isak Paredes and Patrick Wisdom at third base, Michael Busch at first base, they're still going to strike out a lot. So you can have a lot of contact first guys coming up through the system. Tell you what, if Moises Ballesteros can be a contact guy and hit 20 bombs and hit 45 extra base hits, like that's a pretty good sample size and a pretty good combination for your 21-year-old catcher.
I've got one more position player that I want to talk about today, and that's
Sure.
Ed Howard. That's Ed Howard, who got promoted up to AAA Iowa. And Greg Zumak and I recorded a podcast last week, and it was before the announcement of all the promotions happened, and we were kind of
Yeah.
predicting who we might see with the end of the South Bend season, who we might see bump up to Tennessee. Now, not on our prediction list was Ed Howard, and we definitely were not
Yeah.
predicting that he'd come up to Iowa, right? It's so cool from a human perspective to see Ed Howard get that bump up to AAA.
Well, the Cubs have done this before with guys who they consider as prospects, good guys, defense first infielders that, they have a year at the A ball level. They have 400 at bats. They see some good things, see some bad things, and you just want to be able to continue the season. 2022, Cubs did it with Luis Vasquez. He spent all year at High A South Bend, comes to Iowa for 28 games. It's just under 200, hits 2 home runs, has some good moments, some bad moments. He goes into spring training, figure out what he needs to do, has a great year at Double-A Tennessee to start off the year in 2023. Great finish in Iowa. And guess what he's doing this year? He's up in the big leagues. So there is like a ladder of success for guys who are defense first, can really pick it up the middle, that just need some other ABs to be near experienced hitting coaches, experienced players to help their growth offensively. And I think Ed Howard has not looked overmatched at the AAA level. He had obviously the go-ahead bases clearing double at Principal Park on Friday to give the I-Cubs a victory over the Louisville Bats. It's been really fun to see for a guy who has, and I think he'll tell you, has underwhelmed offensively, to come up here to the AAA level, obviously play good defense in short, and have a couple clutch hits at Principal Park to get the confidence going.
Yeah, I think the change of scenery is just so big for him. Whether that's literally just getting to a new destination and like being in Des Moines,
Yeah.
it's just different for him. I'm sure that's huge. Getting around different coach, not that there's any problem with the coaches in South Bend at all,
No,
or
it's
the
it's a
coaches that he
different
works with.
it's a different octave. It's a
Yeah.
different voice.
Yeah, exactly. I think that getting different voices, getting different experiences. Not that I'm not sitting here saying that like hit this promotion up to AAA for the last 2 weeks of the season is going to turn his career around and he's gonna OPS 900 next year. Like that's
Yeah.
not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is from a human perspective and from a let's try to just get a little bit more out of Ed Howard. I think that this is an important move, and I didn't consider it. I didn't think about it, but like I really like that they chose to do this without Ed Howard, their former first round pick. Their guy who's dealt with injuries, the guy who's dealt with coming back from those injuries and experiencing that those struggles. It's huge. I think this is a huge experience for him to get, you know.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, when I was on JV in high school, I mean, exactly the same, right? But like,
It
yeah,
is
I mean, I'm
the
a
same.
sophomore and I'm having a good year at JV, and I come up and I struggle at varsity, and yeah, just to get the taste, and you know have real expected results. Like anything that you do productive, like productivity wise, is a bonus. Like just go up there, play sound defense, hit in the 9 hole and hit 150 or hit 200 and just have competitive ABs. He's done that, came up with a couple clutch hits, has not made an error, a couple really nice plays at shortstop. It's a really positive experience for him.
Let me just point out that you have now compared yourself to in different ways to Kerry Wood and
Yes.
to a Cubs first round draft pick. So
Yeah.
things are going well.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm really humble, guys. Yeah, it's things are going well in the life of me sitting here talking with you on Saturday morning as we record
Oh
this. So
man, it's a hot start to a Saturday morning, man. All right, let's talk pitching. Let's talk pitching because there's some fun pitchers in Iowa as well. I think we got to start off with Brandon Birdsell because if Moises Ballesteros has been the talk of the system in terms of a hitting perspective, I think that Brandon Birdsell this year might be the talk of the system over the course of this year from a pitching perspective. He's been really good and seemingly only getting better. He had a clunker, a couple outings ago, but outside
yeah,
of that, he has been
yeah,
absolutely tremendous. Every single outing, he's looked so
yeah.
strong.
Yeah, I mean, coming into his last outing, he had 6 or more strikeouts in 5 consecutive starts. His previous 3 starts, 18 innings, 10 hits, 1 run, 2-0, bunch of strikeouts, still not walking anybody. He's just a thoroughbred on the mound. Just a guy who you feel will throw hard. Pitch number 1 and pitch number 101. It's going to be the same velocity. I mean, he's a guy who I think could go up in the big leagues right now and be a 4 or 5 and be competitive and give you 4, 5, 6 innings and give you an opportunity to win. 4-pitch mix, throws them all for strikes, never loses his composure on the mound. He has the ability to be a workhorse. His stuff is very reminiscent to Javier Assad to me. The ball, fastball 93 to 96. It's heavy. It feels like a bowling ball. The ability to throw 4 pitches off for strikes, never being affected, always be competitive. I think if you're looking for big league comparisons, guys who have come up through the Cubs minor league system, had a lot of success, and then going up to the big leagues, being able to pitch as a long guy in the bullpen, being able to be a back end of the rotation starter and give your team an opportunity to win, I think it's Brandon Birdsell, who's probably going to be the Cubs minor league pitcher of the year. And his comparison is Javier Assad to me.
Yeah, I think from a outside of the pitch mix and his results and stuff like that, the guy that he reminds when I'm watching him on the mound, like watching him compete, I get reminded a lot of Jordan Wicks. I know like they do it differently because
Like
like
a
they're
right-handed Jordan Wick. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm a sucker for a guy who is a bulldog, who you can describe as a bulldog on the mound, who's a competitor, who's going to go out there and eat you innings. Like I'm a sucker for that. Like right, that is what I want to see in a major league pitcher. Judging pitching prospects is just so incredibly difficult. It is
Yeah.
so difficult because a guy can just like pick up a random pitch out of nowhere. A guy like Cade
Go,
Horton.
go go into the lab in November, be like, oh, I want to throw a splitter, and then it's like, for Jeremiah Estrada, it's his best pitch or best pitch he
Yeah,
gets.
like look at Cade Horton became a first round pick because all of a sudden he learned from a teammate how to throw a sweeper, and he was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
like this is cool." And then
I'm gonna
he
do
went from like
that.
a yeah, it's like pitching prospects are so difficult. So instead, what I'm going to transition to is like what do I see as far as like the non pitch qualities and what I like to see as like in terms of a pitcher out there competing. Brandon Birdsell reminds me of Jordan Wicks in terms of like if Jordan Wicks, my big thing when Jordan Wicks was coming up to the system was that like Jordan Wicks could give up a 4 spot in the first inning and go out there and still get you 6 innings on the bump because he competes
Yep.
through the next 5 innings, right? I see that in Brandon Birdsell. Now he hasn't had to do a whole lot of that because he's been so damn good, but like I see
Yeah.
that in the way that Brandon Birdsell pitches is like he can just go out there and eat you some innings. He can go out there and run his pitch count up to 100 pitches if he needs to. And like
Yeah.
I guess transitioning back to like the pitch mix, like it's really interesting because like he's so heavy in terms of like the fastball, slider, throw a little bit of cutter into the action because of the
Yeah.
fastball qualities as well. He'll flash a changeup every once in a while, but like I think that the fastball slider is good enough at minimum to be like a middle reliever in Chicago for a few years
Correct.
because of
Yeah.
just those two pitches. And like I think there's more to Brandon Birdsell, obviously, than that. But the fact that he can fall back on like fastball slider, I'm a middle reliever, deal with it, like that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that those pitches alone, like remember when he was in college, he was 96 to 98. Now, yeah, as a starter, he's 93 to 96, topping out at 97. But if you put him in a relief role, like there's no doubt that he gets back to 96 to 98, high 90s velocity. Yeah, he's a big leaguer to me. And sooner rather than later, I mean, there's some Javier Assad qualities, as you said, Wicks qualities. There's some Jamison Tyone qualities in there as well. Just the pitchability, workhorse, somebody who once again is going to be competitive every time that he's on the mound. So it's very, I'm very bullish on Birdie. I think that he's going to be a good player.
I get why he has not been called up to Chicago this year. Like I agree with you that he is ready for Chicago. He is ready for the big leagues. I
Yeah,
also understand from a roster construction standpoint on why he was not called up, right? He's not Rule 5
correct.
eligible this offseason. And so, like, calling him up to make 2 starts before you're Rule 5 eligible and then using a
Yeah.
40-man roster spot on him all offseason from a front office roster construction standpoint doesn't make a ton of sense. But
Especially when you are on the cusp of not being in contention. There's
exactly. So,
no
like,
like major value. Like the cons kind of outweigh the pros, and you don't want that.
which I've said on the show, like I think that actually sets Brandon Birdsell up better, right? The fact that like
Yeah,
he's not having to take up the spot on the 40-man roster all offseason. I think what can happen with Birdie is I think he can enter the 2025 season being an very maybe the opening day starter in Iowa next year. That's a very real possibility that he's the opening day starter in
yes,
Iowa. He starts off there, and then at that point, like if he continues to kill it, when he will get called up is when he will likely get an extended look in Chicago. He won't be coming
yeah,
up for like a spot start at the end of the year. He'll be coming up when a guy goes down with a longer term injury, and he can eat 5, 6, 7 starts in Chicago. And I think that's a really good like runway for his big league career. I'm excited for the way this has kind of worked out. And honestly, it's a testament to how quickly he's come up through the system. Had he not come up through the system this quickly, we wouldn't be having this conversation because it'd be happening next year or the year after when he is Rule 5 eligible, right? So
yeah.
like the fact that he was able to come up this fast and be ready to go way earlier than what he's supposed to be, like that's a great setup for Brandon Birdsell. I'm really excited for him moving
Yeah, no,
forward.
it's a testament to him. He's going to be a big time, big league pitcher, and hopefully for the Cubs. So
Wild that we're talking about him potentially making his MLB debut before Cade Horton. It's
yeah,
exciting. It's crazy. Let's talk Connor Noland because I
sure.
think that like I think Brandon Birdsell and Connor Noland get up until recently, actually still now, I guess, get lumped together. Again, we're talking about guys that have weird connections throughout this system. I think Brandon Birdsell and Connor Noland both drafted the same time or the same year.
Yeah.
Both kind of old. I guess Brandon Birdsell isn't as much anymore, but both older guys for their level coming up through the system. Connor Noland now in AAA. He's an exciting guy, getting kind of mixed results in AAA Iowa, but like I think he's at very least really good depth for a major league team in AAA.
Yeah, I mean, a guy who throws 89 to 92 and just knows how to pitch and knows how to compete, and the strikeout number is still being high. There's some Kyle Hendricks to his stuff, a guy who doesn't throw hard. He has some deception. You'll look at end of a game and he doesn't have a fastball over 91, but still has 16 swings and misses in 5 innings. It's like, why? Well, the guy knows how to pitch. So there's some Kyle Hendricks to his game. Obviously, not the same type of changeup and same type of arsenal, but moxie on the mound, composure, and the ability to go at bat to make adjustments. So I'm not saying that he's Kyle Hendricks, but I am saying that normally when you have a righty throwing 89 to 92 and a starter, probably not making it to the big leagues in 2024. And he's a righty in 2024 that throws 89 to 92, and I think can make the big leagues. So I think that he's had a really good year. He's probably top 3 in Cubs minor league pitcher of the year voting. I think it goes to Brandon Birdsell. I think if you asked me in July, it would have been Connor, just with the success that he had to start his AAA career and at the AA level. But really good athlete, former college football quarterback at Arkansas. And as you said, you look at 2025 Iowa, Brandon Birdsell, opening day starter, Connor Noland. If he's your number 2, you're in a pretty good spot.
You know who else was in the quarterback room in Arkansas when he was there? I
Ooh,
don't.
it's tough.
I'm curious though.
He told me, and I forget off the top of my head. I do. So he was there in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I'd have to go back and look. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah.
But I'm always curious about those guys that play college football and like who their teammates were, because it's like it's just wild to me. But yeah, I think that my big takeaway or my big like the thing that I really like about Connor Noland is that he has shown the ability to like make adjustments very clearly, right? Like last year he looked promising, but he wasn't getting enough swing and miss. He wasn't getting enough, like the stuff wasn't playing up enough to get that swing and miss, and he needed to add that this year. Like he had to add it going into this year. So what he did was over the offseason, he worked at shortening up his arm action, right? So he was a longer guy, and he's not like Brandon Birdsell throwing from his ear, but he
No.
is a shorter arm action for sure, and especially shorter than he was last year. That's a very like concrete change that he made over the offseason. I trust him over this offseason to make whatever the next change is to continue to get better and prepare himself for the major league. So
Yeah,
I really like Connor Noland.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, last guy here. I know you want to talk about Michael Arias, who's been interesting. Talk about mixed results for Michael Arias over the course of this season. The stuff is still good. What's your take on what we've seen from him on the bump in Iowa?
Raw. He's
Yeah.
just raw. But anytime you have that type of athletic delivery on the mound, a bowling ball sinker at 95 to 97, a guy who has great slider metrics. He just has to control it. And then the changeup against righties, bearing in on the hands. Really, really good. So the raw stuff is good. 4 consecutive scoreless outings after, while recording this. It's going to be a while for Michael Arias to make it up to the big leagues. He's on the 40-man roster. He's 22 years old. But if he gets in the lab, works, and just throws more strikes, like he could be a high leverage reliever up in the big leagues. Like his stuff, like pure stuff, is that good.
So I know Manny Rodriguez didn't have the changeup that Michael Arias has, but I'm curious about Manny Rodriguez and his comparison to Michael Arias because when both of them were added to the 40-man roster, it was kind of like they had both spent most of their time in the lower levels of the minors, right? Like they weren't guys that were in AA and AAA and proving their stuff there, but they were both added to the 40-man roster. Manny back in 2019 maybe 2021.
2021. Yeah, one of those two.
Okay. And then Michael Arias after this past offseason. And so, like, I think that they were both added because of their raw stuff and because, like, they were so promising while also understanding it may take a minute. So I'm curious, because you got to see plenty of Manny when he was in AAA in Iowa.
Yeah.
What's your take on, like, our patience that we have to have with Michael Arias in comparison to what we saw with Manny Rodriguez during his time in the system before making his way over to the Tampa Bay Rays?
And look what kind of success he's having with the Rays right now. He's now a high leverage reliever in their bullpen 4 years later. And Manny, it took some time. It's a different arsenal. I mean, Manny had more cut. Arias has more sink. But in terms of like the raw projected ability there, like Manny couldn't throw strikes in 2021. Arias at the beginning of the 2024 season with us, before coming up from Double-A Tennessee, or after coming up from Double-A Tennessee, couldn't throw strikes. And that's when you get into the bullpen, and that's when you work with pitching coach Tony Kagul, and you work with Casey Jacobson, the pitching coordinator, and you try to figure some stuff out. And his last outing, like fastball control, good. Changeup looked great, but he was yanking the slider. So once you can get all three pitches working like in a cohesive way, he'll make the big leagues. Good kid, works hard. The raw ability is there. But as I said before, we were talking about this, be patient. It's going to take a little time with him. Yeah,
he's going to run into some 40-man roster crunches. It's inevitable, right? Like when you put up the numbers that you do in Double-A and Triple-A this year, like he's going to be a part of some 40-man roster crunch conversations.
Yeah.
If he sticks around, or if he doesn't stick around and he picks up with somewhere else, he will make a major league debut. Like he will make it up to the majors, whether it's with the Cubs or if he's a victim of the roster crunch, if it's elsewhere. He will make it up to the majors. He will flash that great stuff. And if it's somewhere else, we're going to say, why did the Cubs get rid of this guy? Why?
Yeah. No,
that's just how it works.
2.5 years down the road. I mean, we'll be talking about this, hopping on this podcast in 2027, talking about Michael Arias either being a seventh inning guy for the Cubs, eighth inning guy for the Cubs, or a seventh inning, eighth inning guy for somebody else. You are 1,000% right. He will make the big leagues.
Yeah. All right, man. That's all I've got on my list. Is there anybody else that you think deserves a shout?
We covered it. I got to give a shout out to Darius Hill hitting over 300 over his last 2 months. Cubs minor league hit king in 2022. Just doing the thing here with the iCubs being a very versatile player in the outfield. Matt Mervis hit an opposite field home run for the iCubs yesterday that broke the scoreboard. It looked like a thing out of the natural. But just guys who have been at the AAA level. Mervis obviously with big league experience. Just really good depth pieces for the Cubs and very valuable to the iCubs team.
All right, man. Go ahead and plug yourself. Where can we find you? What's up? What's up with you the last few weeks of the baseball season?
Yeah, it's just been boring stuff. With at the big leagues with Iowa. I mean, it's been a great 2024 season. So you can check me out at Voice of Cohen 2, not Voice of Cohen. Voice of Cohen got hacked. Elon still hasn't canceled that account. Come on, Elon, what are you doing here? But at Voice of Cohen 2, also for the next week, you can check us out at Iowa Cubs at iowacubs.com. We're really looking forward to the end of the season. Go out to Rochester. It'll be a nice last road trip in New York. And just an awesome time of year when you have Iowa Cubs baseball, football season, Cubs still at a playoff race. So it's fun.
I guess somebody's got to end the year way out in Rochester. Might as well
be do it. Got to do it. Might as well be us.
I appreciate you coming on. Everybody out there listening, appreciate you so much for tuning into the show. Like I said, we will be back next week with our award show. We'll be wrapping up the Cubs minor league season. We'll be handing out, I think last year we handed out like between 15 and 20 awards. The superlatives for like the most power in the system, the best fastball, the fastest dude. We'll be handing out traditional awards like the player of the year, the pitcher of the year, the reliever of the year, stuff like that. But then we'll also be throwing out some weird and wonky awards like the Sean Barry most talked about on the podcast award, the Javier Assad award for the guy who's not ranked that might make a major league impact, all that type of fun stuff. We'll be talking about that on next week's show. In the meantime, you can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find the show over on Instagram. You can find the show over on any podcasting platforms. You can check us out on YouTube. Be sure to take a look at I'll try to get some graphics going next week for the award show. We'll see. But you can see that over on the YouTube. So be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, comment, all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will be back in your ears in one short week. Take care, guys.
Yo.